So this video is going to be discussing the significance of Black Moon Lilith entering the sign of Sagittarius. Whoosh. And in my opinion, this transit is not talked about enough, as Lilith transits, in my opinion, are so potent on both an individual and collective level. But sometimes this placement is misunderstood anyway, and so today I want to talk about it. And so Lilith shifts signs every 9 months, but this particular shift is going to be big, as it could spark society's untamed side towards the energy of freedom, finding truth and higher meaning, and a collapse of blind faith, as well as a focus on ideological polarization, where a lot less people will apologize for what they stand for. And this video will not only provide a forecast based on your rising sign, but I will also provide a forecast based on the sign and house of your Black Moon Lilith placement, as this is always going to be directly activated through Black Moon Lilith transits. But I will also be providing a forecast based on your Natal Jupiter placement by sign and house, as your Jupiter placement will define how you expand naturally and will color the quest for meaning and freedom that we see during this upcoming transit. But before we do that, let's get a little bit deeper into what Black Moon Lilith is and what it means for Sagittarius. Black Moon Lilith is technically defined as the lunar apogee. It's the empty point in the moon's orbit where it is the furthest from Earth. And this separation from this Earth to the apogee point generates an energy of exile, a need for raw and absolute freedom, and the untamed feminine energy. And because the moon symbolizes the human need for stability, safety, and peace, Lilith marks the moment where that tether kind of stretches to its limit, signaling a break from the comfort of the status quo in favor of the raw, uncompromising truth. Acting as a void or a vacuum that refuses to be tamed by societal norms, this force drags our deepest rejected personal desires and society's taboo realities into the light, really transforming the fear of isolation into a reservoir of weaponized independence. Lilith in Scorpio, which we just had, historically focuses this untamed side more towards topics like sex, power, and debt, with themes such as female bodily autonomy movements, the focus on hidden sex scandals such as with Epstein Island, and the questioning of corrupt financial government systems being prevalent. And so naturally we go from the themes of power and control of Scorpio to the themes of Sagittarius, where you break free from the cage on a quest for something bigger, considering this unearthed scorpionic energy within that quest. And while Lilith energy prioritizes primal autonomy over civil order, Sagittarius represents the relentless, expansive pursuit of meaning, as well as the absolute necessity of freedom required to find it. Distinct from the simple energy of gathering data from the opposite sign of Gemini, Sagittarius functions as the philosopher that considers and combines isolated facts and experiences into a cohesive belief system or ideology, manifesting as a physical intolerance for the restriction that drives us to expand our horizons, cross intellectual and geographic borders, all in the pursuit of finding a higher meaning. And while some may take those ideological or belief-related themes of Sagittarius and weaponize them or bring shame to some, for others, this expression will simply be wild and free, like a bird breaking free from the cage. And so now that we have the background out of the way, please go down to the description, look for your timestamps, look for your rising sign timestamps, your Lilith timestamps, your Jupiter timestamps, and let's get into the forecast for your placements in 3, 2, 1, go. Aries Rising, you have Black Moon Lilith moving through your 9th house at this time, and so the physical sensation could feel like almost like this burning restlessness really deep in your gut, or specifically a hunger to break free from the rules of how you are supposed to see the world. And you could feel a heavy, suffocating pressure whenever you're around people who follow the rules blindly or just accept things as they are. And so this transit will stir up a wild, almost untamed need to find out what is actually true, even if that truth is a little bit messy or scary. It kind of feels like waking up and realizing that the map of your life that you were either given by your parents, your teachers, or society could be totally wrong, and you have to draw a new one yourself. You could experience this somatic intolerance for anything that feels fake or rehearsed, or small talk might make your skin crawl at this time, and polite agreements could make you feel a little bit angry. And the atmosphere here is like standing at the edge of a dense forest, knowing that the only way to find yourself is to walk through the dark and the scary parts where there are no paths almost. It's a little bit scary. And so it is this feeling of being an outsider or a black sheep, but then realizing that being on the outside gives you a clearer view of what's actually going on. This is kind of what the ninth house can look like. And the energy drives you to hunt for this almost raw and unfiltered meaning of life, and pushing you to ask the big difficult questions that everybody else seems too afraid to ask. And so in real life or in practice, this energy shows up as a deep dive into strange or specific or out there topics that really completely consume your attention, but are designed to expand your horizons like the ninth house. And so you could find yourself spending hours late at night, for example, reading about these crazy theories or maybe ancient history or the darker sides of psychology, because the standard explanations for why humans act the way they do just doesn't make sense to you anymore. And you are looking for the hidden gears of reality. But another example of how this could play out is maybe there could be a sudden shift in your moral or ethical code where you stop caring about, looking good or presenting a certain way with your beliefs, and you start caring about being real when it comes to how you pursue, what you believe. And so you could start saying things that really shock your friends or your family, and you're kind of the one who's pointing out the elephants in the room or challenging a belief system that everybody else treats as truth, or they treat it as sacred. And so you are testing the fences to see if these beliefs hold up. But another way that this could play out is maybe you push your body and your mind to the limit to reach a new state of awareness. And so maybe you take on an intense physical challenge like hiking or breath work, or, something that really expands your horizons and pushes you to a new level that could make you feel slightly altered. And you do this just to see how your mind reacts to it and how you transform when you are being pushed to the edge. And so at this time, you could be chasing experiences that really strip away your ego and show you what you are actually made of when the comfort is gone. But the warning with this transit is the danger of thinking you're the only one who gets it. And so when you discover these new raw truths, you might start looking down on people who are still happy with the simple answers, and you could feel isolated and push away people who love you because you think they're asleep or not smart enough to really understand your new perspective. And so there is a risk of getting stuck in a dark mindset when you think nothing matters, and you end up just feeling angry at the world for being fake while you're the only real one. However, the opportunity here, it's so incredible because this is your chance to build a set of beliefs that actually work for you and can withstand the tests of time. And you get to throw away the ideas that were forced upon you while keeping the ones that you learned from your own hard experiences. And you could become someone who is very wise at this time, not just because you read or because you're like this all-knowing person, but because you're brave enough to really dive deep and to really expand your horizons and aim for those answers and still find meaning within the dark parts of life. And you have the chance to become a guide for others at this time, and you can show them that it is okay to question things and that there is freedom on the other side of that fear. Taurus Risings, for you, this transit pulls that wild, untamed energy of Lilith into the most private and intense part of your life, or at least one of the most private and intense parts of life, which is the 8th house, the house of shared money, deep intimacy, and the things that we usually keep hidden. And the physical feeling here could be like a tightness in your gut, or this almost rising panic about being owned or controlled by a force outside of yourself. Could be another person, could just be in general. And you could feel a sudden, intense need to pull away from anybody that you rely on and to prove your independence. And so if you share money with a partner, for example, or if you're emotionally tied to someone or something in a way that really feels heavy, this energy makes you want to cut those cords immediately so you can finally breathe. And it changes the temperature of your closest relationships, whether things used to feel safe and merged. Maybe you suddenly feel suspicious or desperate to be your own person. But also on another level, this transit could stir up a hunger to look at the darker and in deeper parts of your life, including your fears around death and loss, or just your fears around, the very deep psychological inner workings of life in general. And you might feel a drive to dig deep into the secrets that you have been keeping or the shame that you've been carrying and dragging it all out into the open so that you can finally be free of it, which could be a beautiful energy. And so just for some real life examples, maybe one example is that in your daily life, maybe you have this major shift in how you handle money and trust. You could suddenly feel the need to have a getaway fund that no one else knows about. Or you could find yourself opening a separate bank account or aggressively paying off a debt because owing someone money feels like a trap that you just can't stand anymore. Or for example, in your love life, maybe the dynamic could shift. If you do have a relationship, maybe you completely shut down and refuse to be intimate because it feels like you're giving too much of yourself away. Or you could go in the other direction and you want to explore that wild, taboo side of your sexuality even more so, like the parts that you used to judge. It could be a great thing for your relationship. And maybe you're looking for an experience that really feels raw and honest to you. Another example is maybe you realize there's this energetic, cord that you have attached to something, whether it's a past situation, a family dynamic, a relationship dynamic that is really, sucking you of your value away. And instead of, living with that sort of, pain in your gut or in your head that you kind of just quietly let linger, you finally decide to either go to therapy or do this new practice to finally confront it once and for all. Or maybe when you meditate, for example, instead of just trying to, find the peace, you really confront this inner demon so that you can cut that cord once and for all. And so there is a warning with this transit. The warning with this energy is that you could destroy something stable just to prove that you are free, and you could blow up a perfectly good relationship, for example, or make a dangerous financial move, or you could really, be too impulsive when it comes to your inner psychology because you're projecting your own fear of being trapped onto the situation. And there is almost this risk of using your honesty as a weapon and really digging up deep, painful truths just to hurt someone else or just to feel powerful in a moment of insecurity. And so you have to be careful not to burn down your own house just to see the fire. However, the opportunity is such deep emotional freedom because this is your chance to finally let go of old baggage and shame that really doesn't belong to you. And by facing these dark fears and heavy debts that you could have, you can heal deep wounds about trust and betrayal and finally be set free from that. So maybe you come out on the other side knowing that real safety doesn't just come from a full bank account or a partner or, being happy all the time, for example, but you can know that you're able to face this darkness alone and be completely fine and free within that. And so that is a beautiful opportunity for you at this time. Gemini Rising, for you, this transit kind of throws that chaotic Lilith energy directly into your 7th house, which, as you know, rules over your committed partnerships, the people you face one-on-one connections, but also your open enemies. And you will see themes of this transit, whether you are single or in a relationship. So just know, as an astrologer, I do like to go over both scenarios. And this is essentially the part of your chart that really acts as a mirror. And so the physical sensation of this transit could feel like a jarring disconnection when you look at the people that you're closest to, or when you look at how you connect to people in general. And you could feel a sudden, suffocating lack of air within your daily interactions, where your usual polite chatter or easygoing banter just feels a little bit more empty than normal. And the atmosphere creates a shift where being nice feels impossible if it means hiding who you really are. And you could experience a heavy pressure in your chest when you feel like you have to compromise your truth just to keep a peace in a relationship or a friendship. And this energy forces you to confront the fact that the person across from you, whether it's a spouse, a business partner, or just the idea of a partner, could be stifling your growth. You're not focusing on yourself. And you could feel like almost this magnetic, almost dangerous pull towards people who really represent the wild, or what your definition of wild is, which really draws you to individuals who are loud, maybe opinionated, or at the very least totally free in a way that both terrifies and excites you, like maybe you admire them. And so in real life, for example, this could show up, for example, as maybe a major change in who you are attracted to, both platonically and romantically, but also how you deal with conflict. And so if you're single, you may suddenly stop caring about your usual type and find yourself drawn to somebody who is completely wrong to you on paper, maybe someone unpredictable, blunt, or totally different. background than yours because they represent the freedom that you feel is missing in your own life. Or also maybe you're looking for somebody who wants to like shake up your world, or at the very least you feel like they can shake up your world. And so if you are in a partnership though, this can look like a sudden need to rewrite the rules in your relationship. Maybe you find yourself starting arguments or demanding more space because the old agreements feel like a cage, or maybe you just feel like you could be more authentic in your relationships and you want the relationship to handle your full messy truth, or you don't want it at all. And this doesn't mean that the relationship will end. Maybe it'll become better for this. Another example of how this can play out is maybe it involves an open enemy or a rival, and you could find yourself in a dispute with someone who fights dirty and refuses to follow the social rules, which really forces you to drop the clever tactics of the Gemini rising and stand your ground with raw honesty. And so the warning of this transit is really the trap of projection. Since the seventh house is all about the other, you might start blaming the people around you for your own restlessness. So you could paint a partner or your friends as the villains who are holding you back, when in reality, they are just mirroring your own repressed need for adventure. Or you could attract chaotic and unreliable people because you are too scared to be wild yourself. And so you let them do it for you. And there is a danger in picking people that maybe aren't the best for you. And there's also maybe a danger of picking fights just to feel something or to burn bridges because you feel bored and you really, want to establish your own autonomy within your relationships. However, the opportunity is incredible because this is your chance to build connections that are actually real and authentic and that you can feel free within. And so you can strip away the fake, polite layers of your relationships and build a bond based on total honesty and mutual freedom. And you might find that by allowing the people in your life to be their messy, imperfect selves, you finally give yourself permission to stop performing and to just be who you want to be. And this is really about creating a partnership or an idea of partnership with people or with the world where you have plenty of room to roam free. And that is the ultimate gift of this transit for you. Cancer risings, with Black Moon Lilith moving through your 6th house, this kind of wild, untamed energy will enter the part of your life that deals with your daily grind, maybe your physical health and your work. And for you, this might feel like your body's going on strike, or maybe you just want to rebel around your routines in some way. And so you could wake up feeling a deep and heavy exhaustion the moment that you have to stick to a strict schedule that doesn't really follow your passion. Or you could just find yourself hitting that snooze button with a sense of dread a little bit more often than normal, and it could feel like trying to force a wild horse to sit at a desk, or your body might feel restless, uncomfortable, and maybe even painful when trying to force it to do a routine that doesn't really fit with that wild and free energy that you truly want to live. And it doesn't have to be crazy, but maybe you just want a little more freedom in your schedule, and you could experience random aches or flare-ups, specifically in the hips and thighs, that even doctors could struggle to explain because the issue stems almost from like your spirit feeling trapped, and your body might be loud and clear about what it refuses to tolerate at this time. And this transit could create an atmosphere of rebellion against authority in the workplace. And so maybe you feel a sudden hot anger when your boss tells you what to do, for example, simply because you're being ordered around in such a way that really feels degrading not only to you, but also your soul. And so some real life examples on how this can play out. Maybe, for example, this looks like a major disruption in your work and your health habits. Maybe you suddenly quit that stable, safe job without a backup plan because the office environment or the work environment, wherever you're working, kind of feels like a cage of fake smiles. Or maybe you could stop playing the part of the quiet, nurturing worker and start speaking your unfiltered truth in meetings, which could shock your coworkers who are used to you being polite. Or maybe you decide to leave a steady paycheck for freelance work or gig jobs that really let you make up your own hours, even if it feels scary, for the security that you love. But another example, it doesn't have to really involve work. It could just involve the shift in how you treat your body. Maybe you turn away from the standard medical advice and you try something a little bit out there, taboo, maybe like breath work or herbal remedies or a raw diet, just because you feel like the standard approach is keeping you sick, because there are different things that work for everybody. Maybe you're more likely to tackle and figure out what works for you at this time. But a third scenario, it could involve pets. You have to remember that the sixth house is ruled by pets as well. And so maybe you adopt an animal, for example, that is really difficult, high energy, or wild, and this animal could force you to learn how to handle this energy that refuses to be untamed. And even like another example on how this can play out is maybe you just shake up how you go about your day-to-day life in a way that feels a lot less stifling, and maybe you're not so strict on your schedule. And so the warning for this transit is that you risk self-sabotaging yourself by being unreliable. Maybe you burn bridges at work that ruin your reputation just because you don't want to follow rules anymore. But there's also a danger that you could obsess over your health symptoms, or on the flip side, completely ignore serious signals from your body because you think you know better than experts. Or you could fall into a cycle of being super disciplined for a week and then falling into complete chaos the next. However, the opportunity is that you could find a daily rhythm that actually works for your specific biology, which is beautiful. And this is your chance to escape the daily grind and create a work life that might give you a sense of purpose rather than just a paycheck. And you could discover a way of healing that fixes your physical issues and changes how you see the world, because you have the potential to become someone who helps others because you have a genuine wisdom to share when it comes to your day-to-day life, especially if you use this transit correctly. And you could heal your body by freeing your schedule, and by freeing your schedule, you almost free your life in a way. Leo Risings, welcome to the club. I'm a Leo Rising. I'm so excited for this transit because it will be taking place in our 5th house, and this transit brings the energy of the wild child directly into the part of our lives that involve joy, romance, creativity, and in some cases, children. So for you, this transit might feel like a strong physical need to stop performing for an audience. You could feel a burning urge to stop trying to get applause and instead just do things for the fun of it, to tap into your inner child and just to feel the rush of that fun energy, which is so great because honestly, we need that as Leo risings. And so the atmosphere of this transit could feel heavy, but with excitement, like the moment right before you do something risky just to feel alive, like when you go on the roller coaster, for example, and you might find that you suddenly dislike any experiences that feel too safe or boring, whether that's within your dating life, your hobbies, or how you express yourself in general. And you could feel a drive to metaphorically, per se, color outside of the lines with a permanent marker and say, I don't care because I just like coloring. And if you have been playing the role of the good hero, Lilith might push you to explore the role of the rebel instead. This is something I'm already trying to do with my content. And so this could feel like a creative takeover where your art or your creativity or the things that you find joy and fun in have to feel dangerous or obsessive and totally necessary for your survival. Like this is like fun is going to be a necessary part of your life during this transit. And so for some real life examples, maybe in the real world, this could be a time where you stop trying to be the good person that everybody expects you to be. And you might find yourself falling for somebody, let's say in romance, for example, who makes no sense on paper, or someone wild or totally different from you, or someone your friends might disapprove of, but who lights a fire in you that you can't ignore. Or like maybe like in the creative space, for example, maybe you stop making pretty or play art and you start making things that are raw, controversial, or honest in a way that really risks criticism. And you could stop caring if people like your work and start caring if they feel it. And when it comes to children or even your own inner child, this might show up as a refusal to follow the rule book. And so you could reject the pressure to be a perfect parent, or you could reject, the pressure to perfectly parent yourself, if that makes sense. I didn't know how to word that. And maybe instead you choose a messy, honest style. Or you might feel tired or tied down and try to reclaim your own identity separate from your conditioning or your upbringing, one that really brings you joy. But the warning of this transit is that you could start chasing pleasure without caring about the consequences. So maybe you spiral into gambling or taking big risks or using romantic partners just to make yourself feel good, which could lead to a trail of broken hearts if you're not careful. And so there is danger that you might confuse drama with passion or create chaos just because it feels boring to be peaceful. And so even though you are feeling wild and free, you still gotta vet out the choices you make, if that makes sense. But the opportunity is huge huge because this could be your chance to finally heal your inner child by finally letting yourself be wild and free and do the things that maybe you were conditioned not to do in your past. Or maybe you have like this creative project that is so real and honest that it really connects with people on a massive scale because it really does speak to your hidden desires. Or you could learn that your worth comes from the joy of expressing your true self, no matter how messy that looks. And so this is a great transit and a great opportunity for you to really shine within your true authentic self and your inner child on a level like no other. Virgo risings, anytime a transit happens in an angular house, which is the first house, fourth house, seventh house, 10th house, it's felt massively. And for you, this transit will be taking place in your fourth house and could act as a deep disruption to your foundation because Lilith at the very end of the day is taking residence in the very bottom of your chart. It's the house of your home, your roots, your family, and your private self. It's your deepest, innermost roots, the thing that makes you feel safe and secure. And while you usually crave order and a steady environment, one where you can be free because Sagittarius is likely in your fourth house, Lilith here could create a physical feeling of being a stranger in your own safe space or, feeling like you're a little bit caged. And so you could feel a deep, restless claustrophobia, even if you are just relaxing on the couch, or a sensation that really whispers that you cannot stay where you are. You gotta do something bigger. And this atmosphere could feel like pressure building up in the floorboards, really creating a sense that the traditions or the family stories or even the physical place you call home might actually be limiting your growth. And so you could feel a sudden intense need to cut ties with some part of your past or to run away from the expectations of your parents. In some cases, won't apply to everybody, but this is kind of the energy of the black sheep and realizing that maybe you never really fit in with the herd or that, maybe something that brings you safety and security is very different than you once thought it was. The safety of home might suddenly feel fake, and you could find that the only place you feel truly safe in is the unknown or in a truth that your family or your past really would refuse to look at. And so this could play out numerous ways because it doesn't have to be extreme, but for example, maybe you decide to sell your home and live on the road or try out van life or move to a different country because maintaining a normal home feels safe and suffocating to your spirit. That's a very extreme case, but maybe you try to move to escape the heavy feeling of your roots. Or maybe, for example, on a family level, this could be the time when a long buried secret finally comes out and you may be the one to finally ask a parent about the difficult past event or a hidden truth, which could cause friction or distance between you and your relatives. Or maybe you stop attending family gatherings because you can no longer tolerate the feeling that everyone is pretending things are fine when they're not. But it doesn't have to be that crazy because another example could involve maybe a change to your living space. I just had Lilith transiting my fourth house, and this is kind of how it played out for me. So maybe you tear down walls or completely gut a room or just give it a complete makeover with something that you would have never considered putting in your home before, but it is something that actually makes you feel safe and secure, but also free. It gives you that Lilith freedom. By the end of this transit, your home, for example, could look nothing like it looks now, but that could be a good thing because maybe you're finally expressing your taste in a way that really gives you freedom. Maybe you have that game room or a snack shelf or whatever it is that you want, or just a wall of books. It could be anything, or that cool chair. But the warning of this transit is that you could end up feeling permanently unrooted, like you have nowhere to land. And so in your drive to escape the trap of your past or to build a new future per se, you could burn bridges that you actually need, and you could isolate yourself from the people who support you and convince yourself that you don't need them anymore, which could leave you feeling lonely and unstable. And there's a risk that you could become a runaway, constantly moving or leaving because you're trying to outrun a feeling that is actually inside you. However, the opportunity is so big because it's the chance to break old family cycles or to break cycles from your past self. And this transit could allow you to stop carrying the emotional baggage of your ancestors or your past self. And you have the chance to decide what family and safety really mean for you personally. You could build a home base that is a really true sanctuary for your spirit, or a place where you do not have to hide or pretend. And you could find that your true family is made up of people who you meet on the journey and that you can heal with. And this will allow you to really heal your deepest wounds by becoming your own source of safety in a way that feels freeing to you, which is so beautiful. Libra Rising. And so this transit will be taking place through your third house. And for a Libra Rising who usually tries to maybe keep their thoughts balanced and their words pleasant, you try to keep the peace sometimes, or you carry yourself with grace, this transit might feel like a riot is breaking out inside your own head and maybe even through your words, because it is taking place in your third house, which really governs your mindset, your internal monologue, and how you process your immediate environment. And so the physical sensation of this transit could be like a buzzing restlessness behind your eyes, or like a tightness in your jaw when you're thinking about something very intense. And this could be caused by a sudden inability to really filter your own thoughts. Maybe that filter finally turns off with this transit, which can be a good thing, but obviously you got to have balance, your Libra rising. And so maybe you feel like the polite censor that usually lives in your brain has gone on strike, it's taken a lunch, and now you're kind of just left with it. And so this atmosphere could make your own mind feel like a wild, untamed place where dangerous or raw ideas roam free. And maybe you experience a sudden intolerance for your own cognitive dissonance, meaning you can no longer lie to yourself to keep the peace. And if you have been ignoring a hard truth to stay comfortable, this energy could force you to look at it directly. And it is the energy of waking up and realizing that your own way of thinking has been too small or too safe. And this creates a desperate hunger to expand your mind and to free it, even if it makes you feel anxious or exposed. And so just for some real life examples, like in your private life, for example, this could manifest as a dramatic shift in how you talk to yourself. Maybe the nice voice in your head, for example, that tries to rationalize everything might be replaced by a voice that is more blunt, honest, and could be a little bit aggressive. You could find yourself journaling or writing things down that shock you, realizing that you have been angry or passionate about things that you thought were over. Another example might be an obsessive need to consume information that feels taboo or too much, like in some ways, but maybe this will make you feel free by doing this. So you could spend hours going down internet rabbit holes, reading about radical philosophies, conspiracies, maybe even dark psychology, simply because your brain is hungry for something that feels raw and unfiltered. You might find it hard to focus on mundane tasks because your mind is constantly wandering to these bigger, wilder topics. Ow, I hit my leg. Hopefully you didn't hear that. Anyway, a third scenario could involve a change in how you process the world around you. Maybe you become more hyper aware of the lies or the scripts that other people use in daily conversation. Maybe you could feel physically drained by listening to people speak in cliches, which really leads you to withdraw into your own head just to find some intellectual honesty. The warning of this transit, though, is that you do risk mental burnout or becoming your own worst critic. And because this energy is so fiery, it's restless, you could fall into a cycle of anxiety where your thoughts race a little bit out of control at times. And you might be incredibly harsh with yourself, tearing apart your own self-esteem with brutal honesty that's actually just a little bit too cruel. Watch out for that, because there is a danger that you could overwhelm your nervous system by trying to process too much heavy information at once, which really leads you to feeling a little bit wired and tired. However, the opportunity is the chance to develop true intellectual freedom. Like maybe you finally break free from the need to think right thoughts or the nice thoughts, and you have the chance to reclaim your mind as your own territory, where you are allowed to question everything, including your own beliefs, and to speak on them. And you might emerge from this transit with a voice, both internal and external, that is very powerful, clear, and completely unafraid of the truth. And this could really balance out your Libra rising self to not just be, polite, but you can also be, life-changing with your words. And that is the best way that you can come out of this transit. Scorpio risings, this is going to be potentially a fun one for you, but also potentially a life-changing one, because with Lilith moving through your second house, this wild, untamed energy kind of hits the very foundation of your security, your personal values, your possessions, your money, or your self-esteem. And for you, this might feel like somebody broke into your private vault and let all of the birds out in a metaphorical sense. And the physical sensation during this transit could center in your gut or your chest. It's like this feeling of hunger that cannot be satisfied by food or shopping. And you might feel a frantic need to get rid of your possessions, or on the flip side, maybe a desperate need to hoard resources because you could suddenly feel like you can't trust the world to take care of you. So you're going to be hyper vigilant and take care of yourself in some way. And this atmosphere really creates a rebellion around what you value. And so you might feel physically sickened by the way you earn money, especially if it requires you to compromise your morals or your freedom in some way. A lot of jobs take sometimes too much time, in my opinion. And I have this placement natally, second house Lilith, and I don't like working in a way that really constricts my time and my freedom. And this energy could force you to really look at your bank account and realize the numbers don't define your power. It's you and your worth that defines it. And you might experience a burning question about what you actually are worth as a human being that's very separate from what you own or what you do for a living. And so for some real life examples, maybe in a practical sense, this could look like a major change to your finances that's really driven by a shift in your beliefs. Maybe you impulsively quit a secure, high-paying job because the work culture feels like a trap, choosing instead to hustle in a way that feels riskier but makes you feel free. That's only going to apply to some people. Maybe you decide to invest money into something speculative or foreign, like a land in a faraway place or a digital currency that feels a little bit unknown to you because the standard system feels rigged to you. But another example, it just involves a radical shift in your self-worth and values. Maybe you look at your closet or your home and you feel kind of disgusted by the clutter, which means you purge and sell and donate everything that you don't want anymore to live a simpler life, to help you feel more free from that materialistic tie. But conversely, you could go through a period of retail therapy where you buy expensive or exotic things to cover up a deep feeling of not being good enough. Or you might find yourself in conflicts with others about money or values, perhaps refusing to let somebody pay for you because you want to prove your independence. Or you could just fight over what is truly important in your life, and you could have to fight for your worth in some way. And so the danger for this transit, this is what I will warn you about, is that you could destroy your financial stability or confidence to prove a point. This is a very extreme version, obviously, but this is the risk, because you could make reckless decisions with your money just to show that you aren't attached to it, which could leave you stressed when the bills come due. And there is a risk that you could mix up your net worth with your human worth in some way and feel depressed if your funds get low, or arrogant if they get high. But you could also fall into a trap where you think struggling makes you better or a more spiritual person. However, the opportunity really is the chance to free yourself from the pressure altogether when it comes to, the material world in some way. And this transit could teach you how to survive and thrive without the safety nets that you thought you needed. You have the chance to build a sense of self-esteem that is completely bulletproof because it's not tied to your job title or your assets. And this could be scary, but it is a big opportunity, because doesn't that sound great? And you could discover a new untamed talent, for example, within yourself, or a way of making money or finding value that is uniquely yours. Nobody can take it from you, which really allows you to feel both free and secure. And you could learn that true wealth is knowing you are valuable even when you have nothing in your hands. And that is probably the best way you can come out of this transit, because that means that nothing can shake you, no matter how the world ends up shaking altogether, which is great in my opinion. Sagittarius Rising, for you, this is a big one for obvious reasons, because Lilith is in Sagittarius. And what did I say your rising was again? Oh yeah, Sagittarius. So as you know, Lilith is crossing into your first house, your ascendant, or the front door of your chart. It's moving through your identity and physical body. And this is definitely a noticeable transit because it acts like a physical shedding of skin that might feel intense or itchy, but totally necessary. And you could feel a physical intolerance for your own costume, maybe the clothes you wear, the haircut you've had for years, or even the name people call you could suddenly feel like a suffocating layer of shrink wrap that you just need to claw off and throw in the trash. And so the atmosphere creates a feeling of raw exposure, and you might feel like you are walking around without skin, or conversely, like you have suddenly grown claws that you don't know how to hide. And this can feel vulnerable because there is a primal urge here to be seen for exactly who you are, especially the parts of you that may be considered too much or loud or opinionated. And you could feel a surge of adrenaline in your chest or a restlessness in your legs during this transit, and you might feel physically unable to sit still or to shrink yourself to fit in a room. And this is kind of the energy of the wild horse, realizing the fence, it's just made of paper. It's not like an actual fence. It's not going to stop you. And you're ready to run right through it, leaving the polite version of yourself behind. And then, so for some real life examples, maybe in the real world, this could look like a major makeover of who you are, not just physically, but, internally as well. Maybe you impulsively chop off your hair, maybe you get a tattoo, or you start dressing in a way that shocks the people who know you as the easygoing Sagittarius, or who shocks the people who may have put one label on you, but now you want to kind of do this other label. You are reclaiming your body at this time. Another scenario might involve a moment where you simply stop compromising. You could be the one to suddenly walk out of a dinner party or a meeting or a relationship because someone tried to shush you or correct your behavior, which kind of leads to this reaction of not wanting to be caged in anymore. And you might become known as the difficult one in your circle, not for everybody, but this is because you refuse to act nice anymore for the sake of it. But a third example of how this could play out is this could be a literal physical journey that changes how you look. Like maybe you go on a hike and you live out in the woods for months. This is a very, extreme example. Or maybe you start working out and taking care of yourself and not doing so in the sense of society says you gotta lift weights or run on a treadmill. Maybe you just find a workout that it feels so true and freeing to you. And also another example, maybe you start using a different name or asking people to call you by a title that feels more like the real wild you. So this could play out in numerous ways, as you can see. But the warning here is that Lilith could risk you becoming too focused on yourself. So you might fall so deeply in love with your own rebellion that it becomes difficult to be around other people in some ways. Maybe you're hurting other people just to prove how free you are. This isn't going to be everybody. It just is a danger for some, because there is a danger of becoming a cartoon version of yourself. Because being loud just to be loud or causing trouble just to get a reaction isn't always the way to go. And you could burn down your reputation by mistaking attention for respect, which could be isolating. However, the opportunity is such a rare chance to bring your whole self together and to be your true authentic self once and for all. And this is your moment to merge your hidden side with your public side in a way. And so you could come out of this transit with a level of charisma and power that draws people in because it is so authentic, and you could stop apologizing for existing and become a living example of freedom and really inspire others simply by the way you take up space. And you could learn that being real is much more powerful than being liked, and that can help you move mountains during this transit. Capricorn Risings, for you, the energy of Lilith is going to be transiting your 12th house, which is kind of the foggy, hidden part of your chart that rules over dreams, isolation, and the things that we keep secret. And you're probably wondering, what the heck does this mean to me? Don't worry, that's what I'm here for. And so this could feel like a ghostly transit to you. You could feel this energy haunting you in the quiet moments right before you fall asleep, for example, or maybe the physical sensation here could feel like a heavy fog or a pressure at the base of your skull, giving you a sense that there are secrets kind of swimming in your mind and they are trying to get out. You could experience also this sudden, terrifying vividness in your dreams, maybe nightmares about being trapped or wild dreams about running away from your life. And this atmosphere kind of creates a need for private rebellion. You might feel a deep ache to withdraw from the world, for example, wanting to hide in a sanctuary or a quiet room because the noise of everyday life could feel a little bit painful to you. And you could feel like a hermit who realizes that the truth is found in the dark, not in the spotlight. And you might feel a creeping paranoia that people are talking about you, or a sense that you have hidden enemies, when really you could be fighting against the parts of yourself that you have ignored for years. And so if you want to know examples on how this could play out, maybe in practice, this could manifest as a secret life. And so maybe you develop a private habit or a hobby that is completely out of character. Maybe start studying interesting topics. Maybe you develop a new relationship that's a little bit down low at first, or maybe you write in this diary and you never show anybody what it says. It's just essentially you're gonna maybe be doing something that really allows you to be wild and free without anybody watching, because that is ultimately what this transit is about for you. It's about letting yourself be free away from like the world essentially. And so maybe you struggle with sleep, finding you're awake at 3 a.m., feeling more alive in the dark than you do during the workday. And this insomnia could drive you to explore online communities where you can be anonymous yet honest. And another scenario could involve maybe you actually face your mental health or your habits. Maybe you realize that your way of coping, whether working too hard, drinking, scrolling on your phone, is actually keeping you trapped. And you could voluntarily check yourself into retreat or spend time alone in nature to process this grief or old pain, realizing that you cannot move forward until you deal with what is holding you back. And so another way this transit can play out is maybe the things that you have kind of kept caged in your subconscious. It is finally time to let those things out. And so the warning for this transit is to avoid getting lost in the fog, because this energy could lead to escapism or even self-sabotage at its worst. You could convince yourself that you're not free or the world is against you, retreating so far into isolation that you lose touch with reality. And there's a risk that you try to numb these wild feelings, which might make them explode later in a way that you cannot control. And you could become your own secret enemy, undermining your public success with private behaviors that hurt you. However, the opportunity for this transit really is spiritual mastery, because this is a time when you could clean out the closet of your soul. You might tap into a deep wisdom that goes far beyond logic. You could also learn to understand your dreams or make peace with the parts of yourself that you used to think were shameful. And by facing the darkness voluntarily, embracing it fully, you could lose your fear of the unknown, which will make you feel more free than anything in the mundane world could ever make you feel. And it could help you, translate that into real life. And you could emerge as somebody who draws authority from a deep inner well that's unshakable, because you have already faced your own ghosts and you have become free from them. Aquarius Rising, for you, this transit kind of brings the chaotic, fiery energy of Lilith into your 11th house, which kind of covers your community, your social networks, your friends, your hopes for the future, but also your role in society. And since you are already known as kind of like the outsider or the unique individual with an Aquarius Rising, Lilith here might create a confusing physical feeling where you feel like an outcast even amongst your own friends, or like an outcast among outcasts. And so you could feel like this sudden, strong physical dislike for groupthink, for example, even within the alternative or progressive circles that you usually call home. Or you could feel a tightness in your chest when you are in a crowd, or when you're surrounded by a lot of people or a big cause, and you sense that this social cause that everybody is fighting has become just another set of strict rules, and you're kind of like trapped in that, even the people who are claiming that they want to be free, maybe they're not actually free, and this is something you could realize. And the atmosphere feels kind of like a mutiny, and so you might have a moment at a party or an event where the music stops and you realize you do not actually like any of these people, or that they only accept you if you agree with them. Maybe if you disagree with them on one thing, even if you agree with them on 90% of things, they won't like that, and it kind of makes you feel constricted. Or you could feel a restless urge to break away from the hive mind and stand entirely alone in your pursuit when it comes to your role in society, even if it means losing social status. And this energy might make your body physically refuse to chant the slogans anymore, really pushing you to question if the revolution has become just as controlling as the system it replaced. And so for some real life examples, maybe in the real world, this could show up as like a dramatic change in your social life or your online presence. You might find yourself in a public or private argument with a friend, for example, or a friend group, just because you hold a controversial opinion that the group dislikes. Or you could be the one who gets removed from a group chat, or you could delete your social media apps entirely because the way people act online starts to kind of make you feel sick. Another scenario kind of involves your audience or your role in society, or even social media maybe. And so maybe you suddenly change your entire vision for the future, or abandon a project on social and ambition that really looks good on paper because you realize that this mission that you had has no soul and you want to pursue something that does make you feel free and have soul. Or you could decide to launch a community or a network that is specifically designed for the unwanted, really creating a space for the weirdos or the people you do not feel fits in anywhere else, or the people who don't feel like they fit in anywhere else. Or maybe, for example, there could be a betrayal within a network, or you could discover that an ally was using you for their own gain, leading you to burn that bridge immediately and walk away into social isolation. These are just a few examples, but the common theme is going to be rebelling against a societal cause or your goals within society, or maybe even like friends and friend groups in general. And so the warning here is the risk of becoming someone who disagrees just for the sake of it. You can be contrary and sometimes not always, but Lilith could kind of make you addicted to being the odd one out. You could start picking fights with your friends just to prove that you're free, or ruining perfectly good relationships because you are paranoid about being controlled. And so there is a danger that you might push everyone away, then sit alone wondering why nobody really understands you. And then you could be a little bit cynical about viewing all groups as traps, or, viewing social media as a trap. However, the opportunity really is to find your true tribe in a way that makes you feel free, because this is your chance to stop hanging out with people who just tolerate you and start finding the people who are as wild and honest and opinionated as you. You could become a leader of a new kind of movement, one that doesn't demand everyone looks or acts the same. Or you could have the potential to connect with the true rebels of society, building a group that can actually change the world because you are not afraid of what the mainstream thinks of you. And that could be such an amazing gift to using your Aquarius Rising, especially if Pluto transits your first house. And so hopefully this helps, and I hope this transit turns out to be your wild rebellion. Pisces Rising, for you, this is a highly visible transit. It's happening at that absolute peak of your chart, which is your 10th house. And if you don't know, the 10th house covers your public reputation, your ambitions, your standing in the community, but also it covers your legacy. And so the physical sensation here with this transit could feel like standing on a stage with a spotlight in your face that's a little too bright. You could feel exposed in some way, but also filled with a daring, bold sense of power. You might also feel a physical rejection of the expectations that society has placed on you. And if you already feel this, you may feel this stronger than ever. And so the atmosphere here could feel like a scandal waiting to happen, or a total rebrand of who you are to the outside world. You might feel a deep itch to tear down the pedestal people have put you on, especially if they view you as kind of like this sweet, quiet little Pisces who isn't really powerful. And so Lilith here wants to break the rules on how you are supposed to act in the public realm, or with, your career or your ambitions. And so you could experience a sudden anger towards authority figures, maybe parents, community leaders, bosses, or anybody in charge who tries to manage you. And you could feel a little bit of bitterness towards like the structure of, how careers and public roles are working in society right now. And the energy could push you to stop following the script entirely. The good reputation you have built suddenly could feel like a tight outfit that you cannot breathe in anymore. And so, for example, just a few examples in practice, this could be a moment where you completely change the direction of your life. You might walk away from a path or a role that everybody thinks is perfect for you, whether that's a specific career, a role in your family, or a position in your community, because it feels fake to you. Another scenario could involve a public controversy or a shift in how people see you. You might say, post, or do something that goes viral or gets people talking because it's taboo or a little bit raw. And you could find that this, in quotations, bad publicity actually brings you the exact audience or community you want. People who value truth over politeness. But a third example could involve your relationship with a parent or a boss or a mentor. And you could finally find the courage to publicly disagree with this authority figure, stepping out of their shadow to claim your own power, even if it means people label you as difficult or rebellious. And you could be rewriting the story of who you are. And so the warning for this transit is a potential for blowing up your own spot on the world stage, because Lilith in this house does not care about your long-term security or what your neighbors or the public stage really thinks. You might destroy a reputation that took you years to build over a moment of disrespect, which could lead you to feeling feeling isolated. And there's also a risk that you become known for your messiness or your anger rather than your actual talents or contributions. You could attract public enemies who try to shame you or take away your status. However, the opportunity really is to build a legacy that is real and authentic to you, but also freeing. This is your chance to become a leader who leads with raw honesty. You could become a figure who represents the truth. That could be what you represent, or the person who says what everybody else is thinking, but is too scared to say. And you might use this energy to break the outdated rules of your community or your field or your career and build something new that allows you to be wild, free, and respected all at the same time. And you could learn that your true reputation comes from what you stand for when the room gets quiet, and that could be what ends up defining your long-term legacy for life. With Lilith and Aries, basically this placement means that you're very naturally forward-moving, instinctual, and action-oriented, but you've probably learned to tone that down because people have found your speed or your independence a little bit intimidating, and you might feel a mix of pride and guilt whenever you put yourself first. And so when Lilith transits Sagittarius, you are going to feel a huge surge of momentum. It's not necessarily bad or good, it's just fast. And so mechanically, the pause button between your gut instinct and your action is going to disappear, and you'll feel like this vibrating physical energy that makes you want to go, go, go. And so on one hand, this feels incredibly freeing, like you finally have permission to be yourself, but on the other hand, it could make you feel a little bit restless and ungrounded, like you are moving too fast for your own feet. You might not only be angry, you could feel a little bit energized and impatient. And so, for example, maybe you finally launch a project or a business idea that you've been sitting on for years because the fear of failure is suddenly gone and replaced by pure drive. But on the flip side, you might get so caught up in the momentum that you accidentally steamroll somebody in the process, making a decision for the team without actually asking them because your instinctual side kind of took the wheel. The risk here is speed without direction, because you might end up running a marathon in the wrong direction because you were so excited just to be moving. But the opportunity is using this energy to really break through stagnation in your life, because you have the chance to be forward moving in a way that inspires people or inspires results rather than, pushing things back. And you can really use your independence to clear a path for everybody and to be unapologetic within that. And so this transit really is a green light for your autonomy, which really challenges you to handle the speed without crashing the car, because Lilith in Sagittarius will really be inspiring freedom at this time. Lilith in Taurus, you are wired to be very steady, methodical, and grounded, but you might sometimes feel like the world judges you for being slow or overly concerned with security. Maybe you take your time, and you have a deep need to build things that last. And so with Lilith in Sagittarius, you could experience a tug of war between a sense of safety and adventure, because Sagittarius wants to expand and take risks, while your nature is to stay steady. And this isn't purely negative, though. It could actually be a very productive friction you experience. And so you will feel an internal pressure to step out of your comfort zone, which is uncomfortable, but it's also necessary at times. And you might feel a mix of excitement about new possibilities and anxiety about the cost of those possibilities, whether it's with time or resources, whatever it may be. And it feels like standing on the edge of a diving board, kind of like you want to jump, but your body wants to stay on the ladder, except if you're me, I don't want to jump. And so in real life, this could look like you finally booking a big trip or making a big purchase, but doing it in a very methodical or planned way, researching every detail to make sure you are safe while you explore. Or it could play out as maybe you feel very frustrated with a partner or somebody else who's being very reckless with money or plans, which really forces you to double down on being the grounded one to keep the situation from spiraling. And so the warning of this transit is don't dig your heels in just because you feel pushed, because the danger is becoming so stubborn about your routine that you miss out on a good thing, or conversely, throwing all of your caution to the wind and regretting it later. But the opportunity is that you can be an anchor in the storm no matter what, because the opportunity really is to show that being steady and secure allows you to navigate wild experiences better than anybody else, because you actually prepared for them. You booked that reservation. You took your time to plan the logistics of the trip to make sure it wasn't too busy, whatever it may be. And so this transit really asks you to stretch your boundaries without breaking them, finding a way to grow while keeping your feet on the ground. Lilith in Gemini, this placement means you are naturally very clever, investigative, and curious, maybe even a little bit chatty for some people, but you could struggle with feeling like an outsider because you ask the questions nobody else wants to ask. You value the truth even when it's a little bit messy. And so when Lilith enters Sagittarius, it really creates a tension between the big picture, which is Sagittarius, and the details, which is Gemini. And this could be really stimulating for you. You could feel hyperactive, like a hyperactive need to really understand everything, and you won't just accept what people say. You will feel a compulsion to fact check the world. This can feel like a mental high where you are connecting the dots faster than anybody else, but it could also feel isolating if you realize that others don't care about the facts as much as you do. You are the detective in a room full of believers. For instance, maybe you use those investigative skills to solve a complex problem at work that everybody else was glossing over, really saving the day with your attention to detail. However, you might also find yourself getting into exhausting debates at dinner parties or with your family, whatever it may be, because your clever mind can't help but point out the logistical fallacies of someone's, big picture, optimistic, but not very logistically correct story. And so try not to get lost in the weeds, because the risk is that you become so obsessed with the little details that you miss the point of the conversation, or you come across as a know-it-all. But you do have a gift for clarity, and so the opportunity is to use your curiosity to bridge the gap between distinct facts and big beliefs, really helping people understand why things are happening, not just that they are happening. And so this transit is a mental workout that really challenges you to speak your truth with confidence and really ensure that your questions actually lead to answers rather than just more noise and confusion for the world. Lilith in Cancer, this placement means that you're naturally very intuitive, maybe empathetic, driven by passion. You have a big heart, but you likely have felt the need to hide that depth before because people may have told you that you were too emotional or that your needs were a burden. And so maybe you struggle with feeling safe enough to really show how much you care in some situations. And when Lilith transits Sagittarius, it could create a lot of friction between your need for a safe harbor and the urge to explore, because Sagittarius, it's all about freedom. And while your nature can be empathetic and connected, it doesn't really align with, the big energy of Sagittarius. And so internally, this isn't necessarily just bad tension. It could also be a wake-up call, because you will feel a restless energy in your gut or a feeling that you have outgrown your current shell. You won't just be able to swallow your feelings anymore. They are going to come up to the surface and with urgency, especially because Jupiter is also transiting your sign at this time. You could feel torn between wanting to be close to people, for example, and wanting to run away to protect your energy. And so, for example, you might feel a sudden, intense drive to move houses or change your living situation because your intuition is screaming that the current vibe is a little bit stagnant. But on the flip side, you might find yourself setting a really hard boundary with a family member or somebody you care about because you are driven by passion to protect your own peace, finally saying the thing that you have been holding back for years or months or days or whatever it may be. And so be careful not to isolate yourself completely during this transit, because the risk is that you might feel so overwhelmed by the outside world in some ways that you cut everybody off and you really mistake your independence for safety. But the opportunity is that this is your chance to expand your definition of home and safety and security. And the opportunity is to realize that being intuitive is a superpower that can guide you anywhere, so you can feel safe in your own skin no matter where you are. This transit really does push you to stop shrinking your emotions to fit into the box, and it really challenges you to carry your feelings as proudly as you can as you start to explore this new territory. Lilith in Leo, in simple terms, this placement means that you are naturally very expressive, creative, virtuous, and you have an energy that really radiates light. However, you've probably been shamed for shining too bright, or maybe you've been shamed for being egotistical or caring about yourself, or for putting yourself on a stage, which really leads to a fear that if you show your true self, you'll be rejected or called arrogant. And with Lilith and Sagittarius, the spotlight is going to find you whether you want it to or not. This is a very fiery combination, and so mechanically, you are going to feel a buzzing sensation that really needs to be seen and heard. It's almost like this internal pressure to really create something or say something that matters, and you will feel a mix of excitement and stage fright at this time. The part of you that is creative is going to feel supercharged. You could feel a little bit restless if you have to sit on the sidelines. It's a feeling of now or never, really regarding your personal expression that could be triggered at this time. And so in real life, this could look like you finally taking credit for a project at work, or really standing up for a virtuous cause that really brings you, a sense of passion, and refusing to let others downplay your contribution. But alternatively, you could also find yourself getting into a dramatic situation in your social life because your need to be expressive could come off too strong to some people, and maybe you accidentally make a scene just to feel alive and to feel free. And so the warning for this transit, really watch out for the ego. Not that you necessarily have it. You're allowed to have a healthy ego. That's what Lilith and Leo wants. But be careful not to overextend it, because the danger is that you could get so caught up in the need for validation that you forget actually what you're here to do, or what you want to prove, or what you want to express. And the opportunity, though, is that you have a chance to be a leader, because you can really use your ability to radiate light, to really inspire other people and your inner child. You can inspire yourself as well, really showing them that it's okay to be confident and bold, and it's nothing to be ashamed about. And so this transit really is a test of your confidence, asking you to step into the light without apology, but to do so with the heart rather than just, for the validation or for the applause, which not like you would, but just keep that in mind with anything you do this transit. Lilith and Virgo, I share this placement. I get it. It can be tough because this placement really means that you are very detailed. You're geared towards analysis, and you value practical and thoughtful application. You might often feel like the fixer or the only adult in the room at times, and you may carry some shame around being critical or perfectionistic, or you may fear that you are boring and uptight. I have this placement and conjoins my Mercury. I'm told I have a very sharp tongue, but that is something that could apply to anybody with this placement. And so when Lilith transits Sagittarius, you are going to feel a clash between the big messy picture of Sagittarius and your need for order. And this can feel very liberating if you let it be liberating, because you could feel a strong urge to stop micromanaging everything. And internally, you might feel fed up with the small stuff. And the part of you that is geared towards analysis could feel overloaded by the chaos of the world, which really leads to a rebellious desire to just let things slide because you realize, hey, I can't manage everything. And it's a feeling of wanting to clock out and to stop serving everyone else. And so, for instance, maybe you stop or decide to stop doing a chore that you've done for everybody else for years because they don't really appreciate it, or they don't really help. Or maybe you value the practical application, but while everybody else tells you it's a waste of time. So you're like, you know what? I'll show you. It's a little bit petty, but that could be one way it plays out. Or maybe find yourself critiquing a big vision plan at work, for example, using your detailed eye to point out why it won't work, which can save the project, but it could annoy people in the room. And so the risk is that you get so annoyed with the details that you really neglect your own health and routines, really causing unnecessary stress. And so there is a negative side to really, throwing caution to the wind and not really, allowing yourself to be nitpicky. So it's about that balance, but the opportunity is that you can streamline your life. It's to really use this thoughtful application to figure out what actually matters and what is just busy work. And it allows you to be efficient without being a slave to perfection. And so this transit really challenges you to release that need for control. And it teaches you that it's okay to be messy sometimes, as long as the important things are handled. Lilith in Libra, this means that you are very balanced, fair, and you understand things through the lens of others. However, because Lilith is here, it suggests that you've been shamed either for your need for partnership, maybe you've been shamed for being too nice, maybe you've been shamed for being too balanced or indecisive, really leading you to feel guilty when you aren't keeping the peace or when you prioritize your own view over someone else's. And so when Lilith transits Sagittarius, the energy will shift from we to me, and so you could feel a little bit of friction between your instinct to be fair and the transit's demand for raw, unfiltered truth. So internally, this could feel like an itch to break the rules of politeness that you've set, or you could feel exhausted by the constant need to understand through the lens of others, and suddenly you just want to say what you think, even if it rocks the boat. It's kind of this feeling of wanting to stop compromising just to keep things smooth. And so in real life, this could look like you getting into a heated debate with somebody else, not just because you're angry necessarily, but maybe because you're tired of pretending to agree just to keep things balanced. Or you might might suddenly walk away from a social obligation that feels a little bit fake, choosing to want to do something more wild and solo instead, which could feel scary but also very relieving. And so the warning is, don't become a wrecking ball just because you're bored of being polite, because the risk is that you might destroy a genuinely good bond or destroy the peace simply because you are craving a moment of drama or freedom. It's kind of like letting that Lilith energy go a little too far, but you should let it go free. But the opportunity is you can upgrade your relationships and you can upgrade how you approach harmony in life, because the opportunity is to realize that true fairness allows for disagreement, and you can be a good and balanced and fair person without losing your own voice in the process. Lilith in Scorpio, you're very deep, investigative, and powerful with this transit. And with Lilith here, you have likely been made to feel that your intensity is scary or that your desire to dig beneath the surface is intrusive. You might hide your power or your secrets to really avoid making people feel uncomfortable. And so with Lilith and Sagittarius, that deep water gets a little bit heated up. And so Sagittarius, remember, it wants to expand. So it forces your deep secrets out into the open in some cases. And mechanically, you could feel a pressure to share what you know. You won't be content just sitting with your investigative findings in the dark anymore. You will feel this urge to publish them or speak them out loud, more so than ever, especially because you just went through your Lilith return. And so it feels like a release of pressure, but it also could feel vulnerable, like you are walking around without your usual armor. So for example, maybe you finally open up to somebody about a past trauma or a deep fear, and you use your powerful presence to heal rather than to hide. But on the other hand, maybe you go down a rabbit hole of research on a topic, but you become so obsessed with finding the truth that you lose sleep, really convinced that you are the only one willing to find this. And so you could go a little bit too deep with this. And so the warning really is to be careful not to overwhelm people or yourself with the level of intensity that you're really letting out. It is good to let it be wild and free, but as you know, it can go too far. And the danger is that you might dump heavy truths onto people just to shock them or prove how deep you are. But the opportunity really is that you can transform your pain into wisdom. It's really to take that raw, heavy energy that you've survived and to use it to teach or expand the minds of others and to turn your shame into a badge of honor. And so this transit really invites you to bring your shadows into the light and to show that your power does not disappear just because you share it, which is such a good opportunity for you. Lilith and Sagittarius, let's take a look at you, because this is your Lilith return. You are likely someone who is naturally very optimistic, expansive, and eager for new experiences. However, you've likely been shamed for being too wild or too opinionated or running away when things get serious. Or maybe you've been shamed for your beliefs or your culture in some way. So take what resonates with that. And you might feel like your need for freedom is a flaw. And so with Lilith returning to your sign, it is a massive validation of your nature. And so you are going to feel like you have finally come home to yourself. The shame could drop away and your eagerness for new experiences will go into overdrive, or maybe you'll feel more proud of who you are and your culture and your differences. Internally, you could feel a vibrating restlessness or a physical inability to tolerate boredom or restriction, and you will feel undeniably right about your worldview. It's kind of this surge of confidence where you feel optimistic enough to bet on yourself regardless of what the experts say. And in real life, this could look like booking a one-way ticket or quitting a job to pursue a passion project because you physically cannot stay in that box anymore. But you could also just find yourself preaching your personal philosophy to anybody who will listen, really feeling fully expansive and unbothered by social norms at this time. There is, a little bit of danger with this though, so watch out for the dogmatism, because the risk is that you become so convinced in your own truth that you could stop listening to everyone else, becoming the very thing that you usually hate, which is a preacher who thinks that they know it all. But the opportunity is that you can really rewild your life and free your soul in the way that you've been craving for so long, because you have this natal placement. And the opportunity is to fully embrace your need for freedom and to build a life that actually fits your expansive spirit rather than trying to shrink it to fit somebody else's. And so this transit is your personal reset button, challenging you to live your truth loud and clear, but reminding you to check the map every once in a while so that you do not get lost. Lilith in Capricorn. This placement means you are naturally very practical. You're very security focused. You could be stoic, but you are results oriented. However, you've likely been shamed for your ambition or your need for control, or maybe you've been shamed for the lack of so. Maybe you've been shamed for not being ambitious enough, or maybe you've been told that you are too cold and calculating because you prioritize getting things done over feelings, and this kind of makes you hold back or to, feel shame when it comes to your work ethic or your ability to, push through life's challenges. And so when Lilith transits Sagittarius, you are going to feel a strange itch behind your cool exterior because Sagittarius, it wants to run wild, while your nature really focuses on results. And so mechanically, this could feel like your internal boss is going on strike. You could feel a sudden irritation with the rules that you usually follow, which could be a good thing. Maybe you're stifling yourself, but you could feel a pressure to expand your empire, but in a more risky way that makes your practical side a little bit nervous. Maybe you're willing to take risks at this time. It's kind of this feeling of wanting to achieve big results without having to follow the standard procedure that you think you have to follow. In real life, this could look like you taking calculated risks in your career that could look reckless to others, but it's the only way to get the results you want. Or you might lean into your stoic nature during a chaotic situation and really refuse to panic while everybody else is losing their heads, effectively using your silence as a power move. And so the warning for this transit, though, do not clamp down too hard, because the risk is that you feel so threatened by the chaos that you could become a little bit tyrannical, even towards yourself, trying to control everything around you to maintain a sense of security, which isn't always good for you, as you know. But you could also become a bigger container because the opportunity is to let a little bit of wildness into your plans, realizing that sometimes the best way to get results is to improvise rather than following the script. And so this transit really challenges you to loosen your tie a little bit, proving that you can be successful without having to be too miserable or rigid, and that your way of doing things might actually result in some successful things coming out of your life, which is a beautiful opportunity. Lilith in Aquarius, you kind of walk to the beat of your own drum. You could be innovative and you see things from a detached outside point of view and could have very sudden insights. But when you have Lilith here, it means that you've been made to feel like an alien or an outcast in some way. Or maybe you've been shamed for being too weird or too detached from the group, and you feel, kind of like a black sheep in some way. And so with Lilith and Sagittarius, it does flow pretty well because it makes a sextile to your sign, at least by sign, but it cranks up the volume of your weirdness, which could be a good thing. And so you are going to feel a magnetic pull towards the future, and internally you will feel plugged in. Maybe your sudden insights will come faster and more furiously. They'll come more freely. You might feel a buzzing sense of validation that your detached outside point of view is actually the correct one. And you won't just want to observe like the group or the dynamics. You will want to wake people up or wake things up. It feels like a mental electrical storm where you are finally finding the right frequency. So for example, you might join a group or a movement that is totally radical because it's the only place that really matches your innovative ideas. Or maybe you suddenly detach from a friend group because you realize that they are stuck in the past, and you simply walk away without a big emotional scene because you see the logic in it. Take what resonates with that. It's not going to play out exactly like that, but it could. I don't know. Those are just examples. And so the warning for this transit is to really watch out for a God complex, because the danger is that you could become so convinced of your unique perspective that you treat other people like lab rats instead of humans, really forgetting to connect on an emotional level. But the opportunity is that you can find your cause, your vision, or your tribe. And the opportunity is to use your innovative nature to really solve real problems, connecting with people or causes who really appreciate your unique drumbeat rather than trying to force you into a sympathy. And so this transit is your permission slip to be different, and it really encourages you to use your outsider status to show everyone else a better way forward. Lilith in Pisces, this placement means that you are naturally an energetic or creative sponge. You're very empathetic, you're open and compassionate. However, you have likely been shamed for either having no boundaries, maybe for being delusional, or maybe you absorb too much of the world's pain and it makes you want to hide your sensitivity. Maybe you're shamed for your sensitivity. You could also be shamed for your creativity. And with Lilith in Sagittarius, It could be a little bit of a wake-up call because Sagittarius, as you know, it's the arrow of truth and it's going to pop any bubbles that you've been floating in. And mechanically, this can feel raw. You could feel exposed. You are going to feel a need to defend your reality in some way, and your empathetic nature might feel overwhelmed by the harshness of the truth that people are throwing around. And you might feel a conflict between wanting to stay open yet compassionate and needing to close off to really protect your energy. And it's the feeling of a harsh light being turned on in a dark, cozy room and kind of goes, and it blinds your eyes a little bit. And in real life, this could look like you finally seeing a relationship or a spiritual teacher for who they really are, and you strip away the fantasy. It could hurt, but it frees you. Or it could look like channeling your energy into art and acting as a creative sponge to soak up the collective chaos and turn it into something beautiful, raw, and free. And so the warning is, don't just escape in the fog, because the risk is that when the truth gets too loud, you might try to numb out or disassociate rather than facing the reality that's right in front of you. But the opportunity is that you can ground your magic, because you can really learn that true compassion requires boundaries, and you can be open without letting the whole world walk all over you. And so this transit really challenges you to stop dreaming and start living, showing you that reality can be just as magical as fantasy if you are brave enough to face it. With Natal Lilith in the first house, this rules over your self-identity and appearance. And so with Lilith here, you have likely felt a deep sense of shame simply about just being who you are, or you may have felt shame for taking up space. You might feel like your natural look or your raw identity is too much or wrong, which really leads you to hide your true face from the world. And so with Lilith transiting Sagittarius, this energy transforms into such a powerful liberation. Mechanically, the filter you usually put on to make others feel comfortable could dissolve, but this can feel incredibly freeing rather than just scary. You could feel a vibrating need to be authentic, creating a glow up of the soul where you finally embrace the style or attitude you've always wanted. However, the negative side of this transit is impulsivity. You could feel like your current life is a costume that's a little too tight, which leads to abrupt changes that really shock people, or it could risk your reputation. And so the warning is to be careful with the impulsivity to reinvent yourself overnight, and to ensure that changes are for you and you alone, not just a reaction to anything. But ultimately, the opportunity is to realize that your identity is yours to define, pushing you to stop apologizing for your existence and challenging you to walk in a room as your full and unedited self. Lilith in the second house, this rules over possessions, what you own, self-esteem, and values. I have this placement too, and so having Lilith here means that you could carry a wound around your self-worth or your relationship with money. Take what resonates. Maybe you feel guilty for wanting things, or you might feel like your values are constantly at odds with the people around you. And so with Lilith and Sagittarius, the heavy anxiety around resources could be replaced by a desire for flow and freedom. So internally, this could manifest as a tug of war between holding on for safety and letting go for freedom. On the positive side, you may experience a joyful purge, realizing that certain possessions are weighing you down and really allowing you to sell or donate them to feel lighter. However, the negative manifestation is a risk of financial recklessness, or, maybe you don't feel really in touch with your self-worth, where you could spend money or resources that you don't have to soothe a temporary emptiness or panic that you don't have enough to support the freedom that you crave, or maybe you don't value your self-worth enough. And so the warning is, don't be reckless at this time. The opportunity here is to really align your worth with your truth and realize that your self-esteem doesn't just come from what you own, but from living by your own code and really embracing the resources you have aside from what is just material. Lilith in the third house. This house covers communication and local environment. So Lilith here suggests that maybe you've been shamed for your voice or your ideas in the past. You may have felt like an outcast in your neighborhood or school, or maybe you were told that the way you speak is bad or disruptive, or maybe that you're not intelligent, for example. And so when Lilith enters Sagittarius, your voice will become your greatest asset. It acts like a megaphone for your thoughts. And so internally, the fear of speaking up vanishes and it's replaced by a buzzing pressure to share your truth. Positively, this makes you incredibly charismatic and convincing at this time, because you're no longer afraid to say what everyone else is thinking, which can inspire your community or clear the air in stagnant relationships. On the negative side, though, you may lack a filter, leading to arguments over small things or posting harsh truths on social media that could burn bridges unnecessarily. But the warning is to watch your words and ensure that you are speaking to reveal a truth, not just to evoke a reaction. But the opportunity is to use your communication and use your thought process to say and sift through the things that actually need to be said or need to be addressed, and really transform, your immediate environment by being the one brave person who can speak the truth without really burning things down. And that can really inspire so much change in the world and with yourself. Lilith in the 4th house. This rules over home, roots, your innermost self. And so when you have Lilith here, it usually means you carry a hidden wound regarding your family or your childhood safety. Maybe you feel like the black sheep who never really quite fit into the nest, or perhaps you feel a deep shame about where you come from or your private emotional needs in some way. And so with Lilith entering Sagittarius, the energy shifts from feeling stuck to feeling ready to expand your definition of home and safety. Mechanically, you may feel restlessness within your 4 walls, but this is a push towards finding a place that actually fits for you. And so on the positive side, you can break free from generational patterns. You might renovate your space to reflect your true self, or finally set healthy boundaries with family members that allow you to breathe and realize that you can create your own sense of safety. However, the negative manifestation is a feeling of somatic tightness that could lead to impulsive decisions like moving out abruptly or cutting people off because you confuse that stability with stagnation. So the warning is, do not burn your house down metaphorically just to see the fire, and ensure you aren't alienating your safety just because you feel restless. But the opportunity is to clear out the emotional clutter and realize that home isn't a place that traps you, but a feeling that you can carry inside. And this transit challenges you to find freedom within your private life and prove that you can be safe without being stuck. Lilith in the 5th house. This house covers creativity, pleasure, romance, self-expression, the things that bring you childlike joy. So Lilith here suggests that you have been shamed for your joy, your romance, or your self-expression in some way. You might feel that your desire for attention or fun is just too much, which really leads you to suppress your inner child or feel guilty when you aren't being productive. And so with Lilith and Sagittarius, the volume of your desires gets turned up all the way. And this is the time of reclaiming your right to happiness. Positively, your creativity explodes. You feel a rush of inspiration and may start a passion project or dive into a romance that makes you feel alive. And finally, realize that joy is actually productive too. But on the negative side, you might chase the high a little bit too aggressively. Maybe you gamble with things that you can't afford to lose, whether that's money or hearts or your reputation, simply because a boring routine feels unbearable at this time. And so the warning is to watch out for the crash. Enjoy the ride, but keep one foot in reality. And then the opportunity is to unapologetically embrace your creativity, reclaiming your spark and realizing that enjoying your life is actually a vital part of being human. And this transit is an invitation to play, asking you to find balance between having a good time and making a mess. Lilith in the 6th house. The 6th house rules over day-to-day life, your work, your health and routines. And Lilith here often manifests as a hatred of being told what to do. Maybe you feel like you must always be productive in order to be worthy. There's some shame about not doing enough. Or maybe there's also some shame around illness and service or your health, whatever it may be. And so when Lilith transits Sagittarius, you are invited to revolutionize your daily grind. And so internally, you will feel a rejection of rigid schedules. But this is your body telling you to work smarter, not harder. And on the positive side, you could find a way to make your daily life an adventure. You might change your diet or your workout routine to something that feels fun rather than, tedious. Or maybe you advocate for more autonomy at work. However, the negative side of this transit could be self-sabotage, where your body might act up with fatigue to force you to stop working, or you might ignore necessary admin tasks because they feel beneath you and create a chaotic pile-up later. The warning though, don't sabotage your well-being or ignore your body's needs just in the name of freedom. And so the opportunity really is to invent your day and reinvent it in a way that works for you, finding a way to make your health and work life feel more like an adventure rather than a chore. And this transit challenges you to find a rhythm that honors your spirit, proving that being responsible doesn't have to mean being boring. With Lilith in the 7th house, this is really about partnerships, relationships. It's how you connect to another person, but it's also like the mirror through another person. And so with Lilith here, you might have some deep-seated issues or maybe shame around how you connect to others. Maybe you've been shamed for being too dependent, or conversely, for being unable to settle down. Or maybe you just find that other people have been more nitpicky in your life, which really, makes you feel shameful when you do try to connect. And with Lilith transiting Sagittarius, the energy in your connections will become electric and they will really demand truth. So you will seek partnerships, whether platonic or romantic, who can really run alongside you and not hold you back. You are looking to be free with how you connect. And positively, this allows you to establish incredibly honest dynamics where you stop people pleasing and start showing up as your full self. If a relationship is strong, for example, it becomes an adventure where you both grow. And this, like I said, could be platonic or romantic. However, the negative side is a sudden intolerance for compromise. So if you feel boxed in, you might push a loved one away or impulsively sabotage a stable bond just to prove you're free. Or you could just reject connection in general. Maybe you feel like you can't connect. Another way this transit can play out as well is maybe if you do try to connect, or when you are connecting with people, you do feel a little bit looser in how you connect. And this helps you, become more authentic to yourself. And so the warning is not to blow up a good thing just because you're bored. And so distinguish between relationships that are trapping and ones that require patience. But the opportunity is to rewrite the contract and realize that healthy bonds can handle your need for independence. And so this transit really challenges you to find freedom within connection and prove that you can be committed and free at the same time, but to prove that you can connect with people who value you and don't shame you and who make you feel free more than they make you feel constricted. Lilith in the 8th house. This house covers transformation, the deep parts of life, and shared resources. And so having Lilith here could suggest that you carry a wound around intimacy, trust, maybe even money in some cases, especially if it's shared money. And so maybe you feel shame about your deepest desires, or you might struggle with feeling powerless when you have to share parts of your life with other people. And so with Lilith and Sagittarius, the lights get turned on in the basement of sorts, and this is a powerful time for psychological breakthrough and reclaiming your power. So on the positive side, you become fearless, and you might finally confront a fear or a debt or an emotional entanglement that has held you back for years, and you feel the rush of power as you navigate the taboo subjects with true freedom and honesty. But on the negative side, the intensity can be overwhelming and lead to a frantic need to purge connections or finances, really causing you to make reckless decisions with a shared asset. Or maybe, you kind of constrict yourself in how you express yourself intimately, which really, constricts your freedom and you don't feel free. Or maybe you feel too free to the point to where you feel so intensely that you don't always know what kind of outlet you can express that in. And so the warning is to really be careful with shared assets or the shared parts of life, and ensure you are making decisions from a place of strength, not panic or intensity. But the opportunity is to really heal trust issues and use this bold energy to finally face the deep parts of life without fear, because this transit invites you to trust yourself enough to navigate the dark, showing that your true power comes from having nothing left to hide. Natal Lilith in the 9th house. This is the house of higher learning, expansion, and travel. And so Lilith here often means that you've either been shamed for your beliefs, maybe your culture or your education, and you might have felt stupid in academic settings, or conversely, you might have been the outcast who rejected the religious or moral dogmas of your upbringing, whether that's at home or, with people at school. So take what resonates with that. And with Lilith transiting Sagittarius, this will be in your 9th house, which is kind of like the sign's natural natural home. And this is the double dose of expansive energy. And so positively, you could experience a spiritual or intellectual renaissance. Maybe you book a trip that changes your life, or you dive into a new philosophy that finally makes sense to you, and it makes you feel free, and you feel free to express those beliefs, and it replaces that shame of being wrong with the burning passion for your own truth. However, the negative risk is becoming overly zealous. Maybe you feel so high on your own philosophy that you become dogmatic in some ways, really thinking that you have all the answers and alienating people who disagree. And so the warning is, don't become arrogant no matter what happens this transit. And remember that learning is a journey, not a destination where you are superior to others. But the opportunity is to find your own North Star, pursuing expansion on your own terms and validating your own wisdom, because this transit is a green light for your spirit, really challenging you to go as far as you can, as long as you remember that the journey is more important than being right. When you have Lilith in the 10th house, this is the house of your career, your public image, your role to the public's eye at the very least, but also your leadership. And having Lilith here often means that you have a complicated relationship with either authority but also success. You might have been shamed for being too ambitious, or maybe not ambitious enough, or maybe you feel like an imposter whenever you get recognition, fearing that if the public really knew you, they would reject you. Take what resonates with this. It's either not doing enough, or maybe you feel like you're too intense, or maybe you feel shame with coworkers or with the public in general. And with Lilith entering Sagittarius, you are urged to stop performing and to really start leading, and to lead with such a powerful voice, because the rebellion you feel is actually a pivot towards authenticity. Positively, you can align your career with your soul, pivoting towards a vocation that really feels truthful and gaining a reputation for being honest and real and a visionary. Conversely, though, the negative manifestation is self-sabotage out of boredom. Maybe you feel suffocated by your status and act out in a way that burns professional bridges that you actually need. And maybe you confuse destruction with liberation. And so the warning of this transit is, don't destroy anything that you've built just because you're restless, because building a new path before you bomb the old one is absolutely essential at this time if you want to make the most of it. But the opportunity is to really redefine your career or your public role or your ambitions so that it reflects your actual authentic beliefs. And this transit really challenges you to find a way to be successful without selling your soul, and proving that you can command respect while still being wild and free. With Natal Lilith in the 11th house, this house covers community, goals, friend groups, your role in society. And so with Lilith here, it kind of suggests that you've always felt like a black sheep or an alien of sorts. Maybe you felt like you were excluded from groups early on, or maybe you reject groupthink so aggressively that you could isolate yourself, feeling like you never truly really belong anywhere, or maybe you reject social media. And so with Lilith in Sagittarius, the truth for your true tribe will get a little bit intense, because you are done with the superficial connections and you are ready for an actual movement. And so on the positive side of this transit, maybe you find your people, or you find like a new community where your weirdness or eccentricity is celebrated, and you feel a rush of validation because finally people speak your language. Or maybe you finally rebel against those social causes, or like the societal structure, or like groups that don't really fit your vision, and you decide to join a new movement that more is in align with, you know, what brings you freedom or what brings you purpose, that Sagittarian expansion. But the negative side is that you risk isolating yourself further, or swapping one restrictive echo chamber for another, because you have become so judgmental of what normal society could look like, or, you know, what a friend group should look like, or whatever it may be. And so the warning is to watch out for the echo chamber and ensure you are connecting with people and causes, not just looking for clones of yourself, but people who really stand behind that freeing vision that you have. But the opportunity is to find your true peers, to find your true cause, one that makes you feel liberated, and realize that your unique perspective is the ticket to the right place in society, because this transit really invites you to stop trying to fit in and start trying to connect. And this shows that you can really find your place if you are brave enough to just be your wild and free self. With Lilith in the 12th house kind of rules the subconscious, spirituality, the unseen, transcendence. It's the parts of life that are kind of beyond the mundane. And so Lilith here is often called the hidden Lilith. And so you might not even realize that you have shame until it starts to boil over. This one's a hard one to read because you could struggle with secret fears that you know you're scared of something, but you don't know what it is. Maybe in some cases you struggle with hidden enemies. Maybe you've been blindsided before, or maybe at the very least you kind of feel like your own mind is a dangerous place to be, and it leads you to kind of repress your darker instincts because there's this inherent belief that maybe there's something wrong with you. And this doesn't have to be the truth, but it is something that your subconscious could believe with this placement. And so with Lilith transiting Sagittarius, a bright light will shine into the fog of your subconscious. This is not really haunting. It's kind of like a rescue mission looking to open the cage and let those subconscious thoughts free. And so positively, you could experience a massive release, maybe vivid dreams or sudden insights that help you understand why you act the way you do. And you might dive into therapy or spirituality to finally feel unburdened by the past. And the secrets that come out could feel relieving, not necessarily terrifying. And this is great. But the negative risk is getting so lost in the fantasy that you might use spirituality or escapism to avoid the real world or spiral into delusion rather than finding clarity. If you're not ready, like let's say the cage wants to open, but you force it shut, this could be a consequence because the warning is not to get lost in the sauce. You got to keep your feet on the ground while your mind explores the deep. But the opportunity is to really clear the deck of your mind, doing a massive spring cleaning of your subconscious so that old traumas stop haunting you. And this transit really challenges you to face the dark so that you can finally live in the freeing and expansive light. Jupiter in Aries, you naturally expand through action, courage, and being a pioneer, and your belief system is built on the concept of taking initiative. You find wisdom when you are brave enough to go first. And with Lilith entering Sagittarius, this will trine your Jupiter, at least by sign, which kind of acts as an accelerant for your natural drive. So on the positive side, this is the energy of the inspired trailblazer. You could feel a surge of confidence to finally launch that big idea or to stand up for a cause that you believe in. And you are realizing that waiting for permission is unnecessary. You expand by trusting your instincts at this time and breaking new ground, showing others and yourself that it is safe to move forward. But the challenge is to manage your impatience at this time because the Sagittarian thirst for truth will be mixed with your Aries need for speed, and this can make you move faster than the people around you, and you could feel tempted to bulldoze over details or nuanced conversations just because you are so focused on the destination that you forget about the details around it. And so your advice is to lead the charge with yourself or with others, but remember to look back occasionally to ensure that everything is still working properly so that it doesn't crumble to the ground. Jupiter in Taurus, you naturally expand through stability, sensory experience, and building things that last. You find meaning in what is real, tangible, and what brings you security. So with the Lilith entering Sagittarius, there is a little bit of friction here between your desire to stay put and the transit's desire to roam free. So on the positive side, this creates like this sustainable builder energy. So you have the opportunity to ground these wild new ideas into reality. And while everybody else is getting swept up in abstract philosophies, you can figure out how to fund the movement or to ground these in reality or how to make these new beliefs practically sustainable. And you might realize that true security comes from having values that are flexible enough to grow. But the challenge is the resistance to change because you might feel that the shifting cultural landscape could threaten your comfort zone a little bit and cause you to hold on too tightly to the resources or old ways of doing things. And you might react to uncertainty by becoming a little bit stubborn. So the advice is to let your values evolve because you can keep your roots deep while still allowing your branches to sway in this new wind. Natal Jupiter in Gemini, you naturally expand through curiosity, conversations, and gathering information, and you find meaning in asking questions and connecting the dots. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, which is your opposite sign, you are experiencing almost like a full moon type of tension between the big picture and the specific details. So on the positive side, you are the fact checker. So while the collective energy may be sweeping like people up in this broad generalization storm almost, you will have the intellect to look at the seats. And you can use this time to have dynamic, world-expanding conversations that really challenge the echo chambers going on. And you expand by staying curious and being willing to look at all sides of the argument. But the shadow side is that you could have scattered focus because with so much new truth flying around, you might suffer from information overload, unable to decide what you actually believe in. And there is a risk of playing devil's advocate just for the sport of it, rather than to just, find the truth. And the advice is to use your curiosity to find that truth, not to distract you from it, and focus on the quality of information over the quantity of what you're hearing. Natal Jupiter in Cancer, you naturally expand through emotional connection, heritage, and protecting your tribe. And so you find meaning when you feel at home and when you are nurturing something to grow, whether a person or an idea or even yourself. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, the call for freedom is knocking on your front door. And on the positive side of this, you could become a very inclusive nurturer. You can find yourself expanding your definition of family. You could move beyond your childhood conditioning and find a chosen family or a chosen cause or a chosen set of beliefs that really align with who you're becoming, not just where you came from. And you expand by creating a safe space for others to be their authentic selves. But the challenge is defensiveness, because you could feel that foreign ideas or wild changes are a threat to your emotional safety, which could lead you to close your ranks and shut people out. Or you might try to mother people too closely to protect them from the world. And so the advice is to realize that a home or safety is meant to be a launch pad where you can really take care of yourself, not a bunker where you close everybody and everything out. And it is safe for you to open the windows and to experience the energy, because you have a lot to learn from it. Natal Jupiter in Leo, you naturally expand through creativity, visibility, and leadership, and you find meaning when you are inspiring others and expressing your unique essence. So with the Lilith entering Sagittarius, this fire energy will harmonize with yours, really encouraging you to shine even brighter with your ideas and your unique vision for the world, or at least your unique vision for yourself. And so on the positive side of that, this supports the authentic leader. You are asked to lead with your heart and with honesty, whether that means you're leading an army of 1 or 100. And this is a fantastic time for creative projects that really require you to be bold and unapologetic, because you expand by giving others permission to be themselves simply by being so radiantly authentically yourself in the process. But the shadow side is to watch for this egocentric energy, because the flux of fire energy could make you feel like your truth is the only truth if you let that Lilith and Sagittarius feed your ego. Not that you are egotistical, but with Lilith and Sagittarius, anybody who has an ego is going to grow, and you could inadvertently dominate conversations or expect others to align with your vision without asking for their input. And so the advice is to remember that a good leader empowers others to shine. So lead with generosity. Jupiter in Virgo, you naturally expand through service, analysis, and refining your skills, and you find meaning in the details, the routine, and the practical application. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, there is a clash between your need for order and the transit's potentially chaotic nature. And so on the positive side, you could be a practical alchemist, and you have the unique ability to take big, wild concepts that are being developed at this time and to create a step-by-step plan to actually make them work. And you can find liberation through maybe a new health routine, or by organizing a messy situation into a functioning system, whether it's personally or on a larger scale. And you expand by fixing what is broken to make it better. However, the challenge is you could have a lot of critical overthinking. Maybe you feel overwhelmed by the lack of precision in the world right now, which helps this hyper criticism or anxiety really take over. And you might try to perfect yourself or others to an impossible standard. So the advice: don't try to control the wildfire. Focus on your own garden and let the rest be a little bit messy for a while, because I promise you, when your turn comes, you will be able to put the pieces together, and that will be what the world needs following this transit. Jupiter in Libra, you naturally expand through collaboration, diplomacy, balancing perspectives, maybe even partnership in some cases, and you find meaning in fairness, beauty, and connection. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, the air feeds the fire, encouraging you to be a bit more bold in how you balance and being more bold in your opinion at the very least. And on the positive side, this creates the advocate for justice, and you could realize that keeping the peace isn't as important as speaking the truth. And if there's any time you'll feel like speaking the truth truth that's now, and you can expand your social circle or your perspectives by connecting with people or ideas who challenge you to be more honest and direct, and you expand by standing up for what is right, even if it rocks the boat. But the shadow side of this is you could be a little bit indecisive. Maybe you get swept up in others' strong opinions and you lose track of your own stance, or maybe you try so hard to see both sides of an issue that you fail to really stand on anything. And so the advice is to find your own center, because true balance really comes from inner alignment, not just pleasing others. And it's when you do this that you will find what your truth is trying to say. Jupiter in Scorpio, you naturally expand through transformation, maybe, the deep parts of life, exploring the unknown, and you like to get to the truth. You find meaning in the mysteries of life and psychological depth. And so with Lilith entering Sagittarius, the energy will shift from what is hidden to what is being revealed. And so on the positive side, this is kind of this truth seeker energy, because you are excellent at seeing the motivations underneath the surface. And you might experience a deep psychological breakthrough where you release an old trauma or a secret that has held you back. And you expand by bringing the shadow into the light and also healing and transmuting it. But the challenge is that you could be very suspicious this transit. You might view the demand for freedom as a threat to your privacy or your control, and you could become overly protective of your secrets or your resources, and you really fear that your openness could lead to vulnerability at this time. And so the advice is to put trust that you are strong enough to handle the truth and that you will know how to get to the depths in a way that helps you feel free, because vulnerability can be a form of power, and it could also be the very thing that sets you free. Natal Jupiter in Sagittarius, you are the ultimate host of this transit, and you naturally expand through the quest for meaning. You expand by being optimistic. You like to explore new horizons and put yourself out of your comfort zone. And so with Lilith entering your sign, your natural instincts will be amplified, and you will want to chase this expansion like no other, and nothing is going to stop you from doing that. So on the positive side, this is the energy of the visionary, because you feel a strong alignment between who you are and where you want to go. This is the time, if you want to launch a big adventure or publish your ideas or take a leap of faith, this is the time to do it, because you expand by embracing the unknown with optimism. And if there's any time that you will feel free enough to do it, it will be now. But the shadow side is overconfidence. Because you feel so validated, you might take risks that are unnecessary or assume that you have all the answers when you don't. And there is a tendency to preach rather than listen. So the advice, enjoy the ride, live in the moment. That's what Sagittarius does best. But don't forget to check the map. A little humility will go a long way, but it'll also get you to your destination. Jupiter in Capricorn, you naturally expand through structure, ambition, achieving tangible goals, or at the very least, if you want to grow and expand, you do so through, taking step-by-step action and making a plan. And you find meaning in climbing the ladder or, reaching your goals, or at the very least, you find meaning in what is structured. And so with Lilith entering Sagittarius, you are being challenged to loosen your grip on the rules. And on the positive side, you could be a very strategic innovator at this time, and you can use this energy to build structures that actually support your freedom. It's like this cage, but it feels free in a way, and you might find a way to monetize a passion project or restructure your goals or restructure your life so it feels a lot less restrictive. And you expand by really building this idea that reflects your true values, not just the expectations of others. But the challenge is you could be a little bit rigid, and you could find that the chaotic energy around you is a threat to your hard work, which could lead you to clamp down and control outcomes a little bit too tightly. And you could fear that relaxing means that you're failing, and you could become a little bit of a workhorse, or you could feel like an extra need to work, if that makes sense, but to the point of burnout. And so the advice is to realize sometimes the best way is to allow for some flexibility in your life, and that's how you can make the most of this transit. Jupiter in Aquarius, you naturally expand through innovation, maybe social justice, the collective, or at the very least, you don't like to follow groupthink and you like to walk at the beat of your own drum. And so you find meaning in the future and breaking the norm. So with the Lilith entering Sagittarius, this is almost this harmonious nature that really supports your progressive nature and your vision for the future, whether it's a personal vision or a much larger one. And so on the positive side, this is kind of this future architect energy, and you can connect the dots between freedom and community, or how to be free, but how to build a system that works. And you could find a group of people who share your vision for the future, You could use technology to spread a message for liberation, or you could just find a completely new way of doing the thing that it is that you want to do, whether it's personal or bigger. And you expand by thinking outside of the box and connecting with humanity, and you will find more freedom at this time to do so. But the shadow side is detachment. You could become so focused on the cause or the idea that you disconnect from the actual people involved. And you could prioritize the theory of freedom over the messy reality of what the world is actually like. So the advice is to stay connected to your heart, because progress means nothing if it doesn't really consider all of the factors that are needed to actually make your future and your vision come to life. Jupiter in Pisces, you naturally expand through empathy, maybe spirituality, intuition. You like to expand by connecting to something much bigger than yourself and almost surrendering to the flow, and you find meaning in the universal connection of all things. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, there is a clash between that gentle and submissive and surrendering nature, not like submissive like that, but you know what I'm trying to say, but also this transit's blunt honesty could be a challenge. And on the positive side of this, you could be a compassionate healer at this time, and you can bring a much needed sense of empathy to the harsh truths that are being spoken right now, or you could bring like a sense of empathy and transformation to yourself through these truths. And you might deepen your spiritual practice or find expansion through these like arts or through this communication method or this, new system that really transcends language. And you expand by trusting your intuition and flowing with the changes, even if these changes seem wild right now, which they will because your Jupiter's in Pisces. You can really surrender to the flow and grow so much. But the challenge is escapism, because you could feel overwhelmed by the noise and conflict and retreat into a fantasy world or avoid responsibilities altogether. And you might have trouble setting boundaries with people who are too aggressive at this time. So the advice is to ensure that your boundaries are so strong and your wall is so fortified that you can stay open and surrender to this freedom without feeling drained. With Natal Jupiter in the first house, you naturally expand through your identity, your physical vitality, and personal initiative. You are designed to be the living proof of your beliefs. And you will feel this transit extra potently because anything in your first house is felt potently. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, this expansion will take on a little bit of a rebellious edge. You're not just growing necessarily, you are shedding the polite version of yourself to reveal a raw, unfiltered truth underneath of that. And so the positive side of this is unapologetic sovereignty, unapologetic freedom. Lilith demands that you stop shrinking to make others comfortable, so you may reinvent your style or your presence to be louder, wilder, or at the very least more authentic, effectively daring the world to accept you as you are no matter what, and your confidence becomes magnetic because it is rooted in a refusal to compromise. But the shadow is that you could have this bulldozer effect because Lilith's instinct is to survive, but it could make you a little bit domineering, and you might trample over others in your rush to claim space or confuse arrogance with authenticity. So the lesson is that true power doesn't need to force its way into the room. It just belongs there as is, and that's how you can present yourself. Natal Jupiter in the second house, you naturally expand through resources, self-worth, and building tangible value. It's more than just money. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, your relationship with money really shifts from seeking security to demanding autonomy. And this also comes with your self-worth as well. And so this isn't like about a safety net necessarily, because you are looking for the resources to say no to anybody who tries to control you. And this could create like this economic rebel. It could be a good thing. And you might almost like deter yourself from systems or jobs that compromise your ethics, or trust that your raw talent is enough to sustain you. And you may build a lot of confidence at this time. And you will expand by realizing that your self-worth is not up for negotiation, which could lead to bold moves that align with your gut and help you to gain that worth that you're craving. But the shadow side is scarcity panic, because Lilith acts out of survival. So you could hoard resources out of fear of being controlled, or to spend recklessly to prove that you're free, or to try to like fake that confidence even though it's not there. But the advice is to really build that worth that fuels your freedom, rather than just using your resources as a weapon to protect your ego. Natal Jupiter in the third house, you naturally expand through communication, curiosity, and your local environment. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, you might have no filter, at least more so than normal, because you will be driven to speak the uncomfortable truths that everybody else is thinking but afraid to say, or you could be thinking the things and your thoughts could be a lot more free at this time. And the positive side of this is that this is like a provocative energy, but in a good way, because you have these words that are very powerful right now, and you could write, speak, or teach in a way that shakes up the status quo in your community or really shakes up your mindset in a positive way. And you expand by becoming the voice for the taboo or the unspoken and clearing the air of the secrets that are being held back. But the shadow is that there could be a little bit of verbal recklessness because the Lilith can cut. It really can. And you might mistake cruelty for honesty or start conflicts just to watch the reaction. And there is a risk of gossiping or oversharing to gain dominance. So the advice is to wield your truth like a scalpel to heal, not like this club that you're using to defend yourself. And that is what you have to remember at this time. Jupiter in the fourth house, you naturally expand through home, family, your emotional roots, and a sense of safety in your innermost self. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, that wild woman will come home. And so you could feel like this fierce, almost feral need to purge your home or your obligations, maybe family traditions or guests that suffocate your spirit. Or maybe you just want to like change your home and landscape. Or maybe you finally want to stick up to your family, or at the very least purge those old beliefs that no longer serve you. And so the positive side is you could break generational patterns with this because you are empowered to reject generational guilt and to build this sense of safety and innermost self that actually supports who you are, not what your family or your conditioning told you you had to be. And you are expanding by creating a private world where you don't have to perform for anybody. You can be yourself. But the shadow is that there is this risk of domestic exile. And so you could feel so trapped by like your home life or your innermost self almost that you try to burn it down, and you could push away loved ones in a bid for independence, or you could push away, your roots, even though they aren't doing anything to actually harm you. But you also could struggle to really settle down. And so the advice is to build a sense of safety that is wild and free enough to hold you and whatever brings you a sense of peace, because that is what this transit is meant to do. Jupiter in the fifth house, you naturally expand through creativity, romance, uninhibited play, and that childlike joy. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, your desire for self-expression could become insatiable and perhaps a little bit scandalous. You are done creating art or pursuing romance or taking care of kids, whatever resonates with your fifth house Jupiter, and you're tired of doing it in a way that fits inside a safe box. You want to do it free. And so the positive side is this is feral joy. You could reconnect with the parts of your creativity and your inner child that you were told were too much or weird. Maybe in romance, for example, you attract intensity and passion that really validates your desirability without a sense of shame. And you really expand by letting your inner child run wild without supervision. But the shadow side is that there could be a little bit of drama addiction because Lilith here can confuse risk for fun. You could gamble, for example. You could gamble your heart away. You could gamble your money just to feel a rush. Or you could use shock value as a substitute for genuine talent, for example. And so the advice is to really create from your gut and your heart, but don't destroy your life just because you think this is what you should be putting on the palette. Let it really come from your heart or your soul, whatever it is that you put out there at this time. Natal Jupiter in the sixth house, you naturally expand through daily rituals, work ethic, service. It's your day-to-day life that helps you to grow and expand. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, you become allergic, quite literally allergic to servitude that lacks meaning and that makes you feel constricted. And you will feel physical rejection, maybe like the somatic rebellion against any routine, job, or health habit that really constricts your freedom. So the positive side of this is that this creates almost this autonomous healing energy, and you will realize you're not a machine. You could revolutionize your workflow to honor your natural body rhythm rather than the societal 9-to-5 expectations. And you will expand your body by treating it as a wild vessel that needs respect, kind of like a horse that needs to roam free, not just something that requires maintenance. But the shadow side is that this could come with like this sabotage of duty almost. So maybe you resent necessary tasks so much that you simply refuse to do them. Nope, I'm not doing that, which could lead to chaos in your daily life. You could ignore health advice out of sheer stubbornness. That's also a danger. And so the advice is to really craft a routine that feels like a ritual where you can fly free, not a cage. And so it's about finding that balance. Jupiter in the 7th house, you naturally expand through one-on-one connections and partnerships. It's through the mirror of another that you actually learn about yourself. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, the dynamics of your relationships or your idea of relationships are tested by a need for radical truth. So you're no longer willing to play peacekeeper if it means suppressing your wild and free nature in some way. And so the positive side of this is that this could support liberated partnership in some way. Maybe you attract people who are independent, wild, or wise in a non-traditional way. And these connections really force you to confront where you've been settling or where you are craving freedom. And you might actually go for the freedom because of that. And you expand by, connecting with people who want you to be your full untamed self, not a watered down version of yourself. Or maybe in existing relationships, this is how you decide to come out. You decide to be more free and liberated. And maybe you're accepted for that as, you really inspire them to also be free as well. But the shadow side of that is that you could project the shadow in some way. The shadow side of this transit could be projected onto you. So maybe the volatile or unreliable part of partnership could be something that's experienced. Maybe you're the one who pushes a good partner away because you view compromise as a trap. And so the advice is to be free with another person and to learn how to be free within connection rather than being free from people because you believe it compromises your independence. Natal Jupiter in the 8th house, you naturally expand through transformation, shared resources, the mysteries, and the deep psychological parts of life. So with Lilith entering Sagittarius, you are diving into the taboo. You are drawn to explore the dark, the occult, the psychological underbelly of life without fear and shame. And this is how you can grow at this time. And so the positive side of this is that this is the shame slayer in some way because you have the power to transmute deep-seated trauma, maybe sexual repression, into pure power. And you could find luck in situations that others fear to touch. Or maybe you find ways to free yourself of debt in some ways or energetic cords that you no longer want to be tied to. And you expand by reclaiming the parts of yourself that society told you to hide, and you find wealth in the shadows. But the shadow side of this as well is that there could be power games because Lilith here and Lilith with Jupiter in the 8th house in general could be a little bit manipulative, and you might use your knowledge of others' secrets to control them or engage in risky behaviors to prove you are invincible. And so the advice is to explore the dark, but don't get lost in it because it can be used for healing as opposed to control. Jupiter in the 9th house, you naturally expand through higher learning, philosophy, expanding your horizons beyond what is just your comfort zone. And Jupiter's at home here, but Lilith and Sagittarius will add this little bit of a twist because you're not just seeking knowledge at this time. You are questioning your beliefs, you're questioning the gurus, and you're dismantling the dogmas that you previously accepted as truth because in order for them to stand up, they need scrutiny. And so the positive side of this is that this is the wild philosopher because you are developing a personal code of ethics that could go against the grain but feels so deeply true to you. And you expand by venturing into the unknown, whether it's physically or intellectually, but also refusing to accept secondhand wisdom. You could become the teacher who empowers others to think for themselves, or you could really find a belief that empowers you in a way that makes you feel more free than any other belief you've ever had. But the shadow side of this is it could lead to this almost dogmatic rebellion, and you could reject all authority or advice simply because it is authority in itself, and you could become contrarian without a cause really. And your risk is becoming so self-righteous in your rejection of the mainstream. But the advice at this time is to seek truth, not just conflict, and don't shred things apart if they really feel authentic and true to you. And so that is what you can do the best, embrace the energy of this transit. Natal Jupiter in the 10th house, you naturally expand through maybe career, public image, and legacy. And so what that essentially means is when you are ambitious, when you're going after your goals, regardless if you're succeeding or failing, that is when you'll succeed. And so with Lilith entering Sagittarius, your reputation and your ambitions are colored by a refusal to conform. You will feel a drive to succeed, don't get me wrong, but only if you can do it without wearing a suit that doesn't really fit you. And so the positive side of this transit is that you could become a new type of leader, even if it's just yourself that you're inspiring, and you could be the one who really breaks the rules of how to go after your goals effectively. Maybe you pivot your career to advocate for freedom or truth-telling, or within your current career, you sort of break the status quo when it comes to something within your industry that really, breaks the norms, and it really helps people to feel more free, and it helps things to be more effective. And you expand by letting the public see that real you. They can see the flaws, the fire. They can see how you are so free and how you pursue leadership. And you can see yourself and how you pursue things freely. And this could help others respect you, but it could also help you respect yourself more. But the shadow side of this is it could be notoriety. It could be something that brings scandal to you, because Lilith doesn't care if attention is good or bad. And so you could burn bridges professionally in a moment of rage, or become known for being difficult rather than visionary if you don't, let that fire be a little bit controlled. And so the advice is to ensure that however you rebel, it has a purpose that serves your long-term legacy rather than just rebelling for the sake of it. Natal Jupiter in the 11th house, you naturally expand through networks, friendships, your goals in society, your future aspirations, maybe even groups in some way. And so with Lilith entering Sagittarius, you are drawn to the outcasts, the rebels, the misfits, and you are drawn to the causes that really support those people. And you find meaning in groups or causes that really challenge the status quo and refuse to assimilate just to be polite or whatever it may be. And so the positive side of this is that this creates this social disruptor energy, and you find that your true group or your true cause or your true friends are with those or that cause that really lives on the fringes. And so, for example, maybe you lead a movement or a rally, or you join a community around a cause that demands justice or freedom, or you start posting about it on social media. And you will expand by realizing that truth doesn't belong in this place that suppresses your individuality. If anything, it's supposed to enhance it. But the shadow side is that you could be a lone wolf in the pack. And so you could feel so alienated by society or friends or groups in some way that you reject all community support. Or you might stir up drama within a group just to assert your dominance. And so the advice is to find unity in diversity rather than demanding everybody agree with your specific brand of rebellion. And know that if you do find a group of people that you resonate with, that it doesn't have to be 100% as long as the core mission stays in common. Natal Jupiter in the 12th house, you naturally expand through solitude, maybe spirituality, the subconscious mind. You like to transcend. It is going within your psyche and your subconscious and the unseen that helps you to grow and expand. You are very protected with this placement too. So with the Lilith entering Sagittarius, your inner world will become a place of liberation. Maybe you will free the mental anguish that's kind of been stuck in your subconscious because it goes wild with Sagittarius. And this is a private revolution where you confront your hidden demons and realize they are actually your allies. And so the positive side is that you could be almost this rebel of the mind, and you could stop fearing your intuition and start trusting it implicitly, even when it defies logic. And you expand by engaging in these practices that are raw and unpolished, such as spiritual practices, or finding a connection to a divine source that is direct and personal. And your dreams could be vivid and guiding at this time, so really listen to them. But the shadow side of this is you could fall into an escapist fantasy, and you could use spirituality as a way to bypass the real world or to harbor secret resentments that are faster in the dark. And so you could risk becoming isolated and really hunkered down in your own truth that has no tether to the reality, and it separates yourself from the things that could bring you so much joy. And so the advice is to bring your inner wisdom out into the light and to really embrace it head on.